Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast. We're going to explore some of the top news headlines for today, January 29th, 2025. We've got a lot to cover from international shakeups to some pretty concerning incidents a little closer to home.
It does seem like every corner of the world has a story to tell today.
Let's start with a pretty significant development in West Africa. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger Republic have officially withdrawn from the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS.
Yeah, that's a pretty big move by these three nations, and it sent ripples throughout the region for sure, raising some questions about the future of ECOWAS and, the stability of West Africa as a whole.
Well, ECOWAS is trying to navigate this whole situation very carefully. They have announced some temporary measures to try and keep things running smoothly for the citizens of these three countries.
Right. So for now, things like using ECOWAS passports, existing trade agreements, visa-free travel, and the support for ECOWAS officials from these countries will continue as usual. It's, a pragmatic approach while they figure out a long-term plan.
Okay, so switching gears to U.S. politics. President Trump has sparked a bit of a debate by hinting at a third term as president. He's made some comments about having the funds for another race, and even joked about serving 3 or 4 terms.
Wow, yeah, that certainly raised some eyebrows. Considering the U.S. Constitution limits presidents to just 2 terms, there was even a Republican congressman who introduced a resolution to change the Constitution to allow him another term, though that's going to face a very steep uphill battle.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, especially as we head into another election cycle. Now, on a more somber note, a Nigerian man, Hassan Bun Hussein Abalor Lawal, has been extradited to the U.S. to face charges in a really tragic cybercrime case.
This case is a really stark reminder of the dark side of the internet and the really devastating consequences of online exploitation. Lawal is accused of posing as a young woman online and tricking a 17-year-old boy, Gavin Guffey, into sending explicit photos.
And then he allegedly extorted money from Guffey, threatening to share those photos. Sadly, Guffey took his own life. And now, Lawal could face life in prison if convicted. This case is a really powerful call for greater online safety awareness, especially for young people.
It really highlights the need for parents, educators, and tech companies to work together to create a safer online environment. This is a tragedy that really underscores how vital it is to teach young people about the potential dangers of online interactions and how to protect themselves.
Absolutely, and in other U.S.-Nigeria news, the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration has left thousands of Nigerians in the U.S. facing potential deportation.
Yeah, over 5,100 Nigerians have final removal orders from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Some are being detained, while others are on what's called a non-detained docket, meaning they could be deported at any time.
This situation brings to light the complexities of immigration policy and the very real human impact of those policies. It's a reminder that what might seem like an abstract political debate has really tangible consequences for individuals and families.
The Nigerian government has said that it's prepared to support and welcome back any of its citizens who are deported. But the uncertainty and fear that these individuals and families are facing is undeniable.
Now let's turn our attention to some unsettling news from the aviation world. A MAX Air flight from Lagos to Kano had to make an emergency landing after losing a tire on touchdown.
Thankfully, everyone on board was safe, but this is the 3rd incident for MAX Air in less than 2 years. There have been previous instances of lost tires during landing and even an engine fire shortly after takeoff.
These recurring incidents raise some serious concerns about the airline's safety record.
Yeah, it's likely that aviation authorities will be taking a very close look at MAX Air's maintenance and safety procedures. Following this latest incident, passenger safety should always be the top priority.
Back in the U.S., President Trump has signed an executive order that stops federal funding for healthcare that helps transgender youth.
Yeah, this executive order has reignited the debate about transgender rights and access to healthcare. It's a very divisive issue with strong opinions on both sides.
The ACLU and other organizations are gearing up for legal challenges, arguing that the order is discriminatory and harmful to vulnerable youth.
This situation is a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle for transgender rights and the importance of ensuring access to appropriate healthcare for all individuals, regardless of their gender identity. The outcome of these legal challenges will have significant implications for transgender youth across the country. This situation highlights the complex landscape of healthcare in the U.S., where political decisions can have a really profound impact on the lives of vulnerable populations.
And in another aviation-related story, a United Airlines flight from Lagos to Washington, D.C. had to turn back and make an emergency landing in Lagos due to some technical difficulties.
Right. It's a reminder that even with all the rigorous safety measures, air travel just inherently carries some level of risk.
Several passengers and crew members were injured during the incident, and there are videos circulating online showing the pretty chaotic scene inside the plane.
The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board will be investigating the incident to determine the cause and to make recommendations to prevent similar events in the future. Transparency in these investigations is just crucial for maintaining public trust in air travel. It really highlights just how complex things are when it comes to, healthcare in the U.S., where political decisions can have such a profound impact on people's lives, vulnerable populations.
Absolutely. Now, circling back to that situation in West Africa, the withdrawal of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from ECOWAS, it has the potential to really reshape the political and economic landscape of that whole region.
Yeah, these countries, they've expressed a lot of frustration with ECOWAS. They think that they've been ineffective in addressing security threats and economic challenges, and they're arguing that they can just better manage their own affairs independently.
But some analysts are a little bit concerned that this withdrawal could actually make things worse, exacerbate those existing tensions, and potentially lead to more instability in the region.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that all three of these countries, they've had recent military coups and are facing a lot of internal challenges, including armed conflicts and some pretty serious economic hardship.
So their departure from ECOWAS, it really could create a vacuum. That could be exploited by extremist groups or even lead to more competition for resources.
It's definitely a situation that the international community will be watching closely to see how it unfolds and what it means for the future of West Africa.
Okay, turning back to President Trump's suggestion of a third term. It has sparked a lot of discussion about the limits of presidential power and the importance of, upholding those constitutional norms.
Right. The U.S. Constitution is very clear on the two-term limit. Amending it to allow for a third term would require, a supermajority vote in both houses of Congress and ratification by 3/4 of the states. So that's a really difficult hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, some people argue that Trump's comments are just political posturing, aimed at rallying his base and maintaining his influence.
But others are concerned that his rhetoric is really undermining democratic institutions and that it sets kind of a dangerous precedent for future leaders who might be tempted to, overstep those constitutional bounds.
It's a debate that goes to the heart of American democracy and the very delicate balance of power between the branches of government.
A reminder of the need to always be vigilant when it comes to safeguarding those democratic principles.
The case of Hassan bin Hussein, Abalor Lal, and the tragic death of Gavin Guffey really highlights the threat of cybercrime that's growing and the need for more international cooperation to combat it.
This case involved a perpetrator in Nigeria targeting a victim in the U.S. It just demonstrates how cybercrime really transcends national borders.
Law enforcement agencies face a lot of challenges when it comes to investigating and prosecuting these crimes, due to the complex technical nature of the internet and the difficulty of actually tracking down perpetrators who often operate anonymously.
International cooperation is just essential for sharing information, coordinating investigations, and developing effective strategies to actually combat this, because it's a threat that's constantly evolving.
The deportation of Nigerians from the U.S. raises these really complex questions about immigration policy, national sovereignty, and human rights.
The Trump administration has taken a very hardline stance on illegal immigration, arguing that it's necessary to enforce the law and to protect national security.
But critics say that the administration's policies are inhumane, separating families and causing unnecessary hardship. For people who have built lives in the U.S.
Right. They're calling for a more compassionate approach that takes into account, each immigrant's individual circumstances and provides a pathway to legal status for those who are contributing to society.
This is a debate that's likely to continue as nations all over the world grapple with the challenges of globalization and migration.
Trying to find that balance between enforcing immigration laws and upholding human rights, it's a tough one.
The recent incidents involving Max Air really raised concerns about airline safety and the responsibility of both airlines and regulators to ensure the well-being of passengers.
Airline safety is so important, and even those minor incidents can erode public confidence.
Thorough investigations are really essential to determine the root causes of these incidents and to prevent them from happening again. Airlines have to prioritize maintenance training and really make sure they're adhering to all the safety protocols.
And those regulatory bodies play a really vital role. in overseeing airlines conducting those inspections and enforcing safety standards.
Transparency and accountability are crucial for maintaining that public trust in the aviation industry.
The debate over federal funding for health care for transgender youth reflects this broader discussion that we're having as a society about transgender rights and access to appropriate care.
People who support this executive order argue that it protects children from potentially harmful medical interventions. They believe decisions about gender identity should be delayed until adulthood.
And those who oppose the order say that it discriminates against transgender youth and denies them access to really essential medical care that could improve their physical and mental well-being. They say that transgender youth should have access to age-appropriate medical care, including hormone therapy and counseling to support their transition.
This issue will probably continue to be debated in courts and legislatures across the country as society grapples with these evolving understandings of gender identity and the rights of transgender individuals.
The incident involving that United Airlines flight and the investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board that's going to happen underscores how important it is to continuously improve aviation safety.
Every incident is a chance to learn and make changes that can enhance safety protocols and prevent future accidents.
Those NTSB investigations are really meticulous. They involve analyzing flight data wreckage and interviews with crew members and passengers.
And their findings and recommendations often lead to improvements in aircraft design, maintenance procedures, and even pilot training.
The aviation industry has a pretty remarkable track record of safety, thanks in part to this constant striving for improvement.
Looking at all these headlines together, it's striking how they touch upon several recurring themes.
One of those themes is the tension that always seems to exist between individual rights and collective responsibility.
We see this playing out in the debates over immigration, transgender healthcare, and the role of government in regulating industries like aviation.
Right, it's about finding that balance between protecting those individual freedoms and ensuring the well-being of society as a whole.
Another theme is how interconnected global events are, and how the decisions made in one part of the world can affect others.
The withdrawal of those 3 countries from ECOWAS, it has implications not only for West Africa, but for international relations and global security as well.
The deportation of Nigerians from the U.S. highlights how connected immigration policies are, and, the human impact of those policies.
And that cybercrime case, with a perpetrator in Nigeria and a victim in the U.S., shows how criminal activity in the digital age can really be transnational.
These headlines are a reminder that we live in a complex and interconnected world, where things that happen are rarely isolated, and our decisions can have far-reaching consequences.
It emphasizes how important it is to understand what's going on globally, to foster international cooperation, and to promote dialogue and understanding across borders.
It's a reminder that we are all part of this global community, and our actions and decisions can affect people beyond just our immediate surroundings.
Reflecting on all the news we've talked about today, I'm really struck by the importance of critical thinking and media literacy in understanding how complex our world is.
We're constantly bombarded with information from so many different sources, and it can be tough to figure out what's true and what's not, what's biased and what's objective.
It's so important to learn how to evaluate information critically, to question sources, and to look at things from multiple perspectives, and to be wary of sensationalism and misinformation.
Right, we can't just passively receive information. We have to be active consumers of it.
This means seeking out different viewpoints, being open to challenging our own assumptions, and having those difficult conversations with people who have different opinions.
It's also crucial to remember that even well-respected news sources can be biased. And we need to be aware of those biases when we're taking in information.
In today's world, with all the media we have, it's more important than ever to be discerning about the information we consume and to use critical thinking to form our own opinions.
It's about thinking things through, being curious and skeptical, not just accepting everything we see or hear without questioning it.
It's about learning the skills to deal with the overload of information that we have and to actually understand the world around us.
It's also important to acknowledge the emotional impact of all these headlines. The news can be really distressing, even overwhelming sometimes.
Stories we've talked about today, they touch on some really tough topics: violence, tragedy, injustice, uncertainty.
It's normal to feel a whole range of emotions when you hear about these things: sadness, anger, fear, anxiety.
It's important to allow ourselves to feel those emotions and to find healthy ways to cope with them.
Talking to friends or family members, doing things for yourself like exercising or meditating, or seeking help from a therapist or counselor. Those can all be helpful ways to process those difficult emotions.
And it's important to remember that you're not alone in how you're feeling.
Connecting with others who are going through the same things can give you a sense of community and support.
And sometimes it's okay to take a break from the news. And to do things that make you happy and help you relax, that can really help with your mental and emotional health.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of what's going on in the world, but also take care of ourselves and not get too overwhelmed by it all.
Exactly. It's all about balance.
So as we wrap up our discussion of today's headlines, I want to leave our listeners with a few final thoughts.
Even though the news can be pretty tough sometimes, it's important to remember that there's still hope out there.
Yeah, human history shows us how resilient we are, our ability to innovate, and our constant drive to create a better future.
We've faced so many obstacles throughout history, but we've always found a way to keep going, to learn from our mistakes, and to make progress toward a world that's more just and equitable.
The headlines might not always be positive, but they reflect how complicated the human experience is, and the constant struggle for progress, and that enduring power of hope.
And it's important to remember that we're not powerless when we're faced with these global challenges.
Each of us has a role to play in shaping a better future, whether it's through our own actions, our involvement in our communities, or speaking out for positive change.
We can choose to be informed and engaged citizens who make a real difference in the world.
We can choose to be a force for good and work toward a future that's more just equitable and sustainable for everyone.
And I think that's a really important message to remember as we try to make sense of these complicated times.
It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking discussion today. Thanks for listening to today's top news headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.